Good evening, everyone. As a preliminary matter, this is Adiola Mbaname, co-chair of the DEI task force. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Ruth Febo.
Present.
Adiola Mbaname, I'm here. Juan Acosta.
Present.
Noor Ali. Jean Budenhagen.
Present.
Beth Casavant.
Present.
Thank you. Paula Collins.
Here.
Deb Delgado.
Present.
Thanks. Maura Egan, I know she's out. Jenny Fishman, out today. Louise Garone.
Present.
Thank you. Lindsay Heffernan, I believe she's out. Elizabeth Hilton. Donna Jarrell. Alan Jarrell. Nope. Kelly Joseph. Roop Jyots-Kar. Milan Kanitskar.
Present.
Thank you. Zoya Mehta is out today. Richard Pertucci.
Present.
Thank you. Priya Rathnam.
Yes.
Thank you. Leonora Ryan.
Present.
Thank you. Janine Sands. I don't see Janine. Navjeet Singh.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Rajesh Velagapudi.
Present.
Thank you. And Helene Nguyen, and she's out today. All right, we have quorum. So good evening. This open meeting of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of COVID-19 virus. The order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For this meeting, the DEI task force is convening by Google Meet as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please be sure to press *6 to mute your device. The meeting will not feature public comment, and we can get started. Welcome, everyone. The first item on the agenda today is to approve the minutes for our June 7th, 2021 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve?
Millen here, motion to approve.
I second.
Oh, thank you. Awesome. The next item on the agenda is our final report, and I can't believe we're in July and it's almost a year in. This is amazing. We've come a long way. So we need to talk about a couple of things. And first part is, what should it look like? What should it contain? And then secondly, do we use the template shared via email? I don't know if some folks saw those going around for the recommendations. And then lastly, should each recommendation be on its own sheet, or do we want to combine everything? So we can have that discussion now. So I'll pass it over to Ruth to lead that.
Thanks, Ayola. Thanks, everyone, for showing up today. I'm sorry about the confusion between virtual and meeting in person. So I think what initiated this meeting was I had sent out an email with an example of a proposal to use for each of the recommendation, or an example of a template for each of the recommendations that would be submitted for each of the subcommittees. But there was some confusion as to whether or not that was supposed to be the entirety of the report, or there were a couple of different questions. So I wanted to meet with everyone just to explain what I had thought. And then also, I don't see anybody from the public safety subcommittee. They had sent over a couple of suggestions for what the final report should look like. So I wanted to get feedback from all of you. so we can decide what it wants to look like, so that when you guys start gathering your recommendations and other parts of the report, so that it looks similar to the end product, so Adiola and I don't have to struggle too much to compile it all. So I'm going to share my screen and just show you all the template that I had sent. I emailed all of you an example of what I was thinking, and I literally pulled it off of Word. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, it's pretty simple. So the idea that I had was, let's say I'm in the housing committee, and let's say we have 3 recommendations. The idea that I had was for each recommendation of the 3 to be on its own sheet. So, right, it's the Shrewsbury Task Force. It would say housing subcommittee here, and it would be recommendation 1 of 3. And we give it a priority level, high, medium, or low, or high and low. I know we had discussed that at, I think, our last meeting. I put here, enter here the problem statement, with the description, provide risk, etc. It can be a summary or it can be bullet points, solution for the recommendation for plan of approach, deliverables or what you would see as success, and then optional outline for the schedule of the proposal, and then any supporting data like websites, etc. So I'll stop here before I show you what the Public Safety Committee suggested as a report. Would anybody like to chime in on the thought of having each recommendation on its own sheet? Don't all talk at once.
Richard raised his hand, and then I see Beth's hand. So Richard, then Beth.
I think the format is good, and I would agree that I think each recommendation should be on one sheet, because then they could be prioritized within, you know what I'm saying? So if you have 10 of them, even though you say it's a high priority, someone could still go in and reprioritize them.
Okay, so you're suggesting then, let's say as a large task force, there's 5 subcommittees. Let's say each task force has 5 recommendations, each subcommittee. So that would be 25 that we would then assign each of them, 1 through 25, or within the high, within the low, within the medium. I'd like to hear everything everyone has to say. I'd like this to be kind of ironed out, and I don't want to wait till the last minute to figure out how this is going to look.
This is Rich, just to follow up.
Yeah.
So I guess I was thinking if each subcommittee prioritized them, and then again, so whatever, people wouldn't feel bad, someone else could go ahead and reprioritize them if they're on individual sheets, right? So the overall 25 out of the 5 could still be reprioritized. You know what I'm saying? So one team's high priority, maybe 5th in the list or 6th in the list compared to other recommendations.
Thanks, Rich. Beth, can I just ask, I see you have your hand up, but can I just ask, have there been other committees that have put forth such things, and how have they dealt with it?
Yeah, so first of all, I just wanted to just say that I'm here from Public Safety Subcommittee, and so is Juan. So we are both here.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. And we have had a lot of discussions in our subcommittee regarding the report. And I think Kelly might have given some examples that she's used in her professional life that were good examples. So the closest we have from a town perspective is the fiscal study reports. And those were each, they had subcommittees. They were made up of about 30 members, and I believe Jean was one of them. And they had subcommittees looking at different aspects of town operations, and each one generated its own report. So I guess I'm looking at this as a member of the body that's going to receive the report and then be responsible for actually doing something with the report, sort of executing things. And I personally would like to see it set up so that each subcommittee has its own section. I think that would make it easier to read and react to. And then I would also think that if we wanted to prioritize the priorities of each subcommittee, that maybe that could be its own section in and of itself. And then I also, and I had said this in our public safety subcommittee, like, I think the overall length of the document needs to be manageable, because my hope would be that not only the Board of Selectmen reads the document, but the greater, broader public would read the document. And it concerns me, like, when things get really long, whether or not people will actually put in the investment of time to read it. So I think it would be important if we had maybe an executive summary at the beginning and then a summary at the end. And I'm sorry, they're barking. So just something to make it, if there were people in the public that were only going to read, let's say, a page, that they could get an understanding just from that page.
Yeah, I agree about the a summary at the beginning and the end. And I think that's something that we had thought it would look like anyway. I'll share in a little bit the examples that Kelly had sent over so that the rest of the team can see. They're really great examples. I just don't want to spend hours and hours and hours creating a beautiful document. Yes, it's going to look pretty, but I want it to be more about the content, not so much about what it looks like. But I understand if it looks nicer, more people will read it, right?
Right, but I mean, honestly, I think that it just has to follow some sort of logical format. And I really do think each subcommittee should have their own section with these are our priorities and what we see as what the town needs to implement in order of importance.
Yeah, so I agree, and that's the way we have set up the interim reports, the status updates.
Yeah, they've been good.
So we give a very high level summary at the beginning, then it's a table of contents, and it includes each subcommittee's report. I don't change anything except for a little bit of grammar, the punctuation sort of things that Word tells me, right? And that's it. So I think this will be a little bit more detailed. Well, there'll be a summary at the beginning, a summary at the end, that stuff in between. So I do like that each subcommittee has its own section. What do you think about each recommendation being on its own sheet? Does that matter, or?
I don't think that it matters. I mean, if we're looking to manage the overall length, that may just make it very lengthy.
Yeah.
Right. So let's say each subcommittee has 3 pages. We think about, what do we have, 7 subcommittees now?
A lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's already quite a document, because I would think that the summaries are going to take some pages also. Yeah. And it's not that I think that the length needs to be curtailed in any way. It's just, I think we want to be just sort of recognizing what people will actually read and making sure that we are choosing our words carefully. If something needs to be longer than 5 pages, then it needs to be longer than, like, a subcommittee report. But I think it's just important that we get the point across in a concise way so that people read it. I personally want it to be readable, a document that's readable to people.
I agree. Thanks, Beth.
Ruth, I just wanted to keep in mind, Milind has his hand up, and Navjeet for a comment.
I see Milind, Navjeet, and Rajesh.
And Rajesh, yep.
Yeah. Milind, you're up next.
All right, thank you. This is Milind here. So yes, I like the discussion that we should have a standardized format just from a presentation perspective with summary and the summary recommendation at the end. And I like Beth's idea about having subcommittees having their own page for recommendation. One thing I was wanted to extend that thought was, I think prioritization is will be confusing, because every subcommittee's context might be different, or the way they weight certain importance will be different. So I think that's something we may have to put a disclaimer that, probably it's just for the order of, in what that particular subcommittee says, but I think implementation can be open because there could be some low-hanging fruit that, you know, town might be able to do it in 2 months' time. But more important thing might take, you know, like budgetary support, which will need some other volunteering efforts that might need to go on for months before even, you know, we can bring everyone onto the table. So I think there is that fine line, I would say, and there is a balancing act. So I think we may have to word it, you know, like what prioritization means. If we can explain that, and it's not like you can't do number 6 unless you're done with 1 to 5. You know, I think we need to kind of explain that. That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Melinda. Yeah, I agree that I think each subcommittee should prioritize their recommendations, but I don't think that all of them should be then reprioritized or given a priority. Yeah. Thank you. Najit, welcome. It's so nice to have you on our meeting.
Thank you so much. No, it's good to be here, and appreciate you kind of being able to accommodate me. I know even though you were probably trying to get a in-person meeting, so I appreciate that so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you again. And so I think love the idea of a standard format for recommendations. I'm a little concerned about having subcommittee kind of recommendations separate, because when I saw the first draft, there were areas of overlap. As an example, the education subcommittee recommended, let's say, and they called it anti-racism training. Others called it diversity training. I know the employment subcommittee had recommendations on that. So I feel if we have overlapping recommendations, and especially if the content of the recommendations is different, it can be confusing for the town as a whole, for me as a town to say, so what exactly are we recommending? Are we recommending 6 different types of training based on each subcommittee? And this is, I think, where we as a task force have to take on some overall responsibility. And we can't just sort of pass through, if you will, each subcommittee's recommendation. There's got to be some discussion, and we may have to make some choices and kind of weigh the merits of similar recommendations and try to consolidate. So that's I'm looking at it from a very practical perspective, both from the way I see it is from Beth's perspective. If the Board of Selectmen and the town manager has to receive these recommendations and decide how and which ones to implement, and similarly from the perspective of a resident. So I think the main issue here I see is that where there are kind of similar recommendations or similar topics, we are kind of we are ducking the question then of making some choices and weighing in on kind of potentially conflicting recommendations.
Thank you, Najit. So I'd like to hear from other folks on how they feel about that. So what I would propose, and Adil, I know we haven't spoken about this just because it just came up, but that all of the subcommittees submit their recommendations, right, to us, to the larger task force. We all, individually take time to read them, reconvene as a group, and then discuss which ones we move forward, if that's what you all are interested in, or no.
Yeah, I see hands raised, so I see Rajesh, Louise, then Richard. But just to follow up on your comment, Ruth, I really do like the idea Najit had in mind to consolidate. I think if there's areas of redundancy, we should definitely kind of hone in on those and really trim down so that it is readable and it makes sense and it's a valuable document. It's not just a whole bunch of just random recommendations. So I do like that idea. to go further along, Ruth, with what you said, why don't we, when everyone kind of has the chance to meet with their subcommittees, they have their final documentation, and we'll talk a little bit about timeline towards the end, or projected timelines of when these reports would be due. The idea is to already have have another meeting, a full group meeting, to look over all of these items. So I think Ruth suggested on your own, when it's all submitted, we'll put it up on the shared drive, everyone take a look at it, come with questions, come with homework, so that at that last meeting or second to last meeting we'll have as a group, we'll be able to kind of wordsmith, sift down on areas of redundancy and kind of have a more cohesive document. So I will pass it over to Rajesh, and then Louise, and then Richard.
Thank you. So yeah, I think I might have missed the point, but I was thinking a subcommittee summary, and then every recommendation from the subcommittee may be an individual page. That way, the recommendations come in a different page than a summary and other discussion points. So that way, if the committee or any other residents want to look at very quickly, they can always go to the summary pages, skipping, the recommendation pages, skipping the summaries and all the other text fields. And then to Navjit's point, yeah, he raised a good point that where there may be a few overlaps there. So I think maybe as a bigger committee, we can review those overlaps and make a 5-box or 6-box sort of analysis where to put the recommendations into 5 different boxes. So like these are the recommendations related to healthcare, like a very front page of the a report can pull all the recommendations. We do the analysis, we put them into the respective segments, education recommendations. That doesn't matter, it need not necessarily from a subcommittee, but overall that all falls into education will go into one bucket, one box, like a 5-box analysis. So that way the residents can quickly grasp what's happening and then run with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Rajesh. I think Louise was up.
Louise, yep.
Thank you, and thank you to all the speakers who've contributed. I have I'd like to draw an important distinction between goals and objectives and the strategies used to implement those goals and objectives. So I stand on the position that it's important for each subcommittee to have its own report. I do not think that overlap between goals, let's say that multiple subcommittees recommend training or diversity education, I don't view those as conflicts. I view those as reinforcement. And so once again, I believe that this subcommittee's, this task force's objective is to set goals and objectives for the town. That when multiple subcommittees have overlapping objectives, that means that the nature of that objective and the nature of that goal is very important. When it comes to implementing and to designing the strategy to affect that implementation, then I think we step back because that is not our job. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Those are really good points, or a really good point. Does anybody have any comment on that? Paula?
Yeah, I agree with Louise that I don't think it's our job to talk about how they're going to implement it or what it's our job to say, these are the priorities, these are where we see the issues, and step back.
So, Rich.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think just listening to all the great comments, I think what I'm hearing made me think of, I think we have 2 different things going on, right? I think, to me, it's good to have a template that each, well, I like the idea for a template for each recommendation because of some of the things that we said, even if it doesn't make it into the final report that way, or maybe it's just an appendix in the final report. But if everybody's consistent with the template, right, then we could just pull, right, the recommendations in the beginning as the summary. So you know what I'm saying? I think we're talking about what I'm listening at. We're talking about two different things. We don't want it too long, but people don't, you know, everybody wants to get the recommendations out. So I think if we stick with this template or something like this, then it's consistent. And then when we do have that meeting, we could say, okay, maybe in the summary, these two ideas are the same or similar. We don't have to repeat them in the summary, but they're in their appendix. We could even refer to them in the summary and say multiple, you know, teams or subcommittees recommended this. So just listening to people, I think we have two different things. I agree that it has to be short, because just even from work, if people don't read the first paragraph of my email, they're done, right? So I think we have to be concise up front, but if we stick to a template, then that'll help us and whoever's pulling this full report together with consistency. And then, like I say, it could be just a cut and paste to the summary.
That's a really great idea. No, thank you, Rich. That's a really great way to approach it. I like that. Malin, do you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I think Rich and I were probably thinking on similar lines. Rich was probably 5 seconds earlier than me. So thanks, Rich. But yeah, I was just going to say that is like, you know, the summary could be the recommendation, and we can kind of, you know, put a footnote if you want to have a detailed description. You know, you can put an annexure or, you know, appendix to the overall summary, and, you know, if people want to just click on that, they can see the additional or supporting data. You know, how, you know, what kind of information subcommittee or, you know, particular task member reviewed it to arrive at that. You know, if someone, because we have done that deep dive session, and yes, all these things are there on the Google Drive as a public data, but I think if a common resident is going to look at it, you know, it's good to have it in one collective document. The second thing I was just going to say, which I missed first time, was in a template it says budget, but I don't think any one of us have, you know, gone into, or it's not under our purview as far as my knowledge is concerned, that, you know, we are not going to talk about monetary things and everything. So I think if we can keep that out, you know, and, you know, first step is to recommend things, and then probably as the follow-up things happen, you know, probably in next year or so, you know, there will be another probably committee will be set up to kind of take a deep dive, and that's when probably the budget and other things, or, you know, what kind of resources will need to be pulled and whatnot will come up. In that context is how I am looking at it. So I think common template is yes, but I think we should stay away from any recommendation from budget perspective.
Thanks, Malin, and I agree. I put that in there. It does say optional, but I put that in there more. You know, if a team could find an example of, you know, a town in California that had a task force that was able to do, you know, your recommendation by tapping into whatever budget, that sort of information, not necessarily a monetary like a number, but thank you. Paula wants to see the template again, so I'll just share that again, and then I'll also share recommendation from the Public Safety Committee on what they would like to see in the template. So we'll spend maybe 5 or 10 more minutes on this topic, if that's okay with everyone, and we'll move.
And as you're showing this, Navjeet had his hand raised. I don't know if he wanted to add a comment to what was said.
Go for it, Navjeet.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to. I think there's a very fundamental, I feel, philosophical issue being raised. That is this report a collection of reports from the subcommittee, or a report of the diversity task force? And does each recommendation, are we expecting that each recommendation is agreed to by a majority of task force members? Or are we kind of essentially passing through recommendations um, from each subcommittee? And having said that, I do want to acknowledge what both Rich and Millen said. To me, there are two. I think that I have no. I'm not contesting. I'm agreeing with the recommendation regarding having standard template. But I do think ultimately we, as the committee or as a task force, have to decide kind of that what we are recommending. Are we just passing through what each subcommittee has recommended, or are we kind of, as a task force or as a member of a task force, agreeing with all the recommendations in the task force? So that's something I think over and above the format and template, we should probably come back to that question once we have a draft final report in terms of the content that we agree to.
Thank you, Navjeet. I don't know. Do you guys think we have to vote on that, or maybe Beth, you can chime in? I agree with Navjeet wholeheartedly. I feel that if this is going to be titled, DEI Task Force Final Report, it should be a consensus. I see a couple of people nodding heads, but mainly I just see blank stares. I don't want to take a vote because I know that's not on the agenda. I just want to hear from you. Leonora, you have your hand up, then Louise and Paula.
I just need a clarification of what's an example of an objective and then a recommendation. Are we giving both? These are our recommendations based on these objectives.
Louise, you're up.
Leonora, I can address that. If your recommendation is a change in behavior policy, some other aspect of operation, then that recommendation is a potential objective. Now, can I ask my other question? And that is, come on, guys, the Supreme Court doesn't have consensus. Let's be realistic. Why shouldn't we allow for a minority opinion? If there is something in our final report that we vote on, and there is a strong feeling by someone that that there's a minority opinion that needs to be expressed, why not? That's the way of the world, in my opinion.
Paula was next.
I lost you guys for a second. So I somewhat agree with Louise in that we're not going to get 100% consensus on this is what it is, right? So to me, I like these. I like the templates. I think that's the back end of it, right? We're going to publish that this is what each subcommittee came up with, because whether or not we as a committee decide some of these are high priority or low priority, there's still findings, and that's still the work of the task force. So I think it should be in the report. I think the devil of the details are all going to be in that executive summary, right? And whether it's like, we have found that there is definitely an issue with in terms of diversity in employment across departments, and we know that not everyone lives in a $800,000 house, and there are equity issues with healthcare. Whatever they are, that big report, and that's going to take some doing. With the number of people that we have, I don't think that's going to be a quick meeting to say, here's the reports and let's just go. I think we're really going to have to go through committee by committee to say, okay, everybody read them ahead of time, because we're not going to take the time to do that. And this is what this committee's recommending. Let's have a 10-minute discussion, and then, okay, this is now move on to the next one. And then after we hear all of them, all 7 committees to say, okay, now let's talk about what's going in the full report. Out of those 7, what's our number one? What does everybody think is the number one, and get some kind of consensus. I like the idea of an in-person meeting for that, because I think there's going to be some back and forth. It's hard to do on Zoom. I think there's some discussion. There might be, somebody might have a slick presentation. I don't know. But I just think it would be nice to have an in-person meeting for that, because I don't think it's going to be quick. And you can split it into 2 meetings if you want, but it's not going to be quick.
I agree. Before everybody was on, Adiola and I were talking briefly about the schedule moving forward. And I mean, it's already July, right? And people have vacations coming up, and we realize that. So the schedule might have to change as opposed to the proposed schedule, from last month or the month before. So Leonora, your hand is still up. Is that on purpose? And then Melinda.
Hey. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Melinda, you're up.
Yep, thank you. So yeah, I was going to say, I think we all need to have an opportunity to review the final report in advance, so that, not to build a consensus, but, just to see, I know each subcommittee was formed so that, we can concentrate on a particular topic, and we all respect and, believe in each other's abilities. But I think as a DEI task force recommendation, we are all participant to that, and we are all voting for that, right? So it may not be consensus, but I think we need to have opportunity to review. And, I think as Paula was saying, maybe we should have, each subcommittee present, probably in a joint meeting, like this is what we are recommending, and find out the gaps, something they might have missed, or something might have occurred since they compiled it, right? So it's something might need to be worded differently, so that it's more open than it just, I think it will be a good idea to have that common forum, and then compile it or finalize it as a recommendation as October approaches.
Thanks, Melinda. Rajesh?
I echo what Melan said. So we do need to understand what other subcommittees are recommending and how they reach to that conclusion as a broader, bigger committee. So we are aware, so that we are aware of those recommendations and the thought process they went through for those recommendations. That way, we all can say common language when we talk to the residents.
Yeah. Thanks, Rajesh. Rich? You're on mute.
Just clarification what Paula was saying. I'm a little confused about this prioritization thing again. I might have misunderstood what Paula was saying, but
so basically what I'm saying
getting
is,
together to reprioritize them. I didn't.
No, what I'm saying is that if we use the template that they just proposed, and each subcommittee does that, then we would all have to read them and get back together to do whatever, to put together the executive summary, which would be, again, as I think, I forgot who said it, was Louise or Lenora that said, if you were seeing the same thing in a couple of subcommittees, then that's really important, right? And then that's something that we need to, would probably come to the top of the pile in terms of priority, right? If there's something that keeps crossing over or whatever. But I think there's a task force report, and we split into subcommittees to get the work done, but we need to then bring that all back together. And I think the only way to do that is to go through these individual reports from each subcommittee. So it's not necessarily saying we disagree that all the, whatever work they did in the health isn't really a priority. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying let's just read them all and figure out what we have to be able to summarize in an effective way. We're bringing back to the Board of Selectmen what we found in all these areas, and then what are we recommending they do about it? And that's the bottom line about what we're doing. When it says, what's the objective or the goal? I love the piece that says, how do you know you achieved it, right? And it could just be ongoing, right? It might be something that's not really going to have an end piece to it. It's an ongoing thing that you're going to keep doing because you need to be doing it. Or it may be something that, well, when you reach 50% instead of 2% in this category, then we know we would consider that a success. Or maybe it's only 10% because that's the national average. Who knows? Whatever you're going to put in for your parameters. But we have to make a recommendation on everything that we saw, I think is important. Still on mute, Ruth.
Thanks, Paula. Rich, are you good with that? I don't think we've really set anything in stone. I think what we've kind of come up with is that we need to meet, and it's probably best that we meet in person. I agree with that, Paula. I realize that not everybody can make it, but hopefully we can have a quorum. And I think we have the capability or the ability to meet, if we meet in person, to have people dial in. We just have to be in the right room at Town Hall. So we can figure that out. Deb, your hand is up. You're on mute.
I think Paula and various other people have made very, very good points. I think one of the things that we're all going to have to kind of like dedicate ourselves to is making sure once these reports get done that we come prepared at that live meeting, so we have the background that we can, discuss it. If we're going to make progress, if you will, and that's easier said than done because there are a few subcommittees and it's going to take time and dedication. And I also think that a lot of our recommendations are going to be ongoing. They'll start doing them, but it doesn't mean there's an end date on some of them. They're going to be ongoing, hopefully, many of them, in many future years. And they may be added to at some point. But I think the expectation isn't that they'll do something and then stop, because I think, what we're working on has to continue and be ongoing. My thoughts.
Thanks, Deb. So, Louise, you have your hand up. Before I let you speak, or not let you speak, sorry, before you go, I also want to remind everyone that the survey group is still doing their thing. And I thought that we wanted, or some subcommittees, maybe all of them, wanted to hear what came out of that so that they could do a little bit more work. Because what I was thinking was, a lot, from looking at the reports, the updates that you guys have submitted, it looks like we're almost done, right? We're not done, but we're really approaching what each of the subcommittees has been looking into. But then with the survey coming out, I'm guessing that will probably add a few different things to all of the subcommittees' agenda. So I know that we had suggested less meetings in the summer, but I don't know if we're really going to be able to get away with that, just because there's still a lot of work to be done. And yeah, just that. So Louise, I'll give you the floor. Oh, it looks like you're stuck. Louise, you look frozen.
So Ruth, while we're waiting for Louise to unfreeze, I would say
I turned it off.
Okay, thanks, Louise.
I turned my camera off because you were breaking up badly, and I didn't think I had the instantaneous bandwidth to receive you. I also wanted to point out the two favorite words of industry, not applicable. For example, if a committee has a recommendation that is a goal and is a stretch goal, and you have a form you have a template that says, how will you know when you reach this goal, or how will you measure your path to this goal? You can always use not applicable, because there may not be a way to measure it at the moment you are writing the goal, but that does not eliminate the importance of the goal, nor does it take away the right of that subcommittee to recommend that goal.
Thanks, Louise. Paula, you were going to say.
I was gonna say, yeah, I agree. I think we don't have to have the answers. We just have to have the, priorities, I think. What I was gonna say is that along with the survey is the same with the stories, because, and I don't know if, Nora has if she posted those in the Google Drive. So, what we have found is that, people are not real willing to come forward with stories, which tells me we have an issue, right? Because they're afraid to bring them forward or nervous about bringing them forward or whatever. But we have pages upon pages upon pages of excerpts from the Shrewsbury Facebook pages, where people are very liberal in their opinion and their personal attacks, which I think solidify some of our points. So I'll talk to her about getting those onto the drive so that the subcommittees can go through and just kind of sort through those to see what pieces of that you can use as your supporting data, because I think that's where that goes, is if there's a particular story that particularly resonates. We actually had one of our committee members pretty brutally attacked on one of those pages, that I asked her to please write that story up and submit it. But I think between the survey and the stories, I think that's where that goes, is that additional data. And we can put the survey in the back of the report as well. The survey results is a separate thing too.
Thanks, Paula. So can I just say something about that? I hate to use Facebook as an example of, what we know is happening out there. Especially because I don't know if it can be verified, right? If it's coming from someone in the town, if it's happening to someone in the town, I think you would have to dig a little bit deeper than just the name. And I don't know how the privacy would work with that. You're more than welcome to share
anything you post on that page, it's a public page. So you post on that and you put your name on that, it's public. There's no rights to privacy. Yeah. There's no anything. You decided to spew your public vitriol, then that's thank you for the data, because you just gave it to me. It's public. So and there have been some even I run the watershed page, and even that page, which is not even talking about anything racial, has taken some ridiculous turns. We had to shut down a post yesterday, actually. So that data is there to utilize.
Okay, thanks. So before we move on to the survey, because that's on the agenda, storytellers to provide an update. How are we feeling about the report and where we're moving with that? So I think overall people like using the template of one page per recommendation. And I think Rich, I'm not sure what it was, adding it as an appendix. I love that idea, right? And then having the executive summary. So I just want to share quickly what about the employment subcommittee suggestions? Yes, that's what I'm going to share. Public safety, I think it was. So can someone say if they can see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So Kelly from the Public Safety Committee had some notes, just general report format, table of contents, and executive summary. Beth talked to some of this already. An introduction, subcommittee findings, challenges, a conclusion, glossary. I think this is really important. A little glossary for people to have. Maybe they could keep it in their back pocket, and an appendix. So they showed, they sent 2 examples, or Kelly sent 2 examples. And what I was mentioning earlier is, they're beautiful, especially this one, right? A lot of graphics, to me, this report is something that I would sit down and like to read, but I don't want to spend, unless there's someone on here that is proficient with this sort of thing. I don't know how I could easily do some of this. unless there's a template that I could easily fill in, Adiola and I could easily fill in. So I really like the looks of this, the looks of these little tables, these little cards, the graphics. I don't know if any subcommittee has submitted graphics, but I do like the look of it. And then there was another one that's a little bit more in line with what I was imagining it would look like, but contains the same, same information, executive summary, a table of contents, etc. So before we move on to the storytellers, let's spend a couple of minutes on this. I'll keep my screen sharing just in case anybody has any questions. Adiola, can you field if there are any raised hands?
Yep, of course. And then I'll just add my comment that just as you were going through, I like the pretty report with all of the colors on it, but I think, again, if we're thinking about being practical, thinking about our time, I want to kind of focus more on content than making it look, really interesting. I think folks will read it as long as it's concise, because some of the graphics do take up a lot of the pages as well, right? So,
right.
Just my opinion is I like the simplified version. The second one you showed better. Just in the matter, just in context of what we're proposing, and we're hoping to share in many places, print it out in many places. So thinking of not wasting ink, like color, simple things like that. I like the second one.
Thanks, Adiola.
Did you share these with everyone?
No, I can send them out after the meeting.
I do like graphs, though. I do like the idea of having like a bar graph.
All right. So is there anyone with a comment?
I agree. I think anytime you can take out just text and make it more interesting, whether it's a map or a bar graph or a pie chart or whatever, it definitely, makes it, again, most people only want to read for 30 seconds. So the easier you can make it to digest the information, the better.
All right. Thanks, Paula. Rich?
Sorry, I know we want to wrap this up, but there was something that was kind of it's kind of minutia maybe, but how we're going to word some of these recommendations, because I know in our subcommittee we had this kind of back and forth of is it a shall do this, a should do this, or could do this? I know it's minutia, but as we get all these different subcommittees together, I was just curious. You know what I'm saying? Are we saying like you will do this, or
yeah.
We recommend that you can't? You know what I'm saying? It's
just
something to think about.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I mean, they are all recommendations, but I think we can figure that out in the next couple of meetings. Maybe something to talk about in person. But yeah, that's a good point. All right. So if there's nothing else, I'd like to pass it over to the storytellers, right? Storytellers, yes.
Yes.
So just as my clock is going berserk, so hang on a second, sorry. Okay, so we have only gotten 15 stories submitted, which frankly is a little bit shocking given the number of people just on this task force that have probably had a story that they've either witnessed or had themselves, but that's the reality. So like I said, I think that the excerpts we have from Facebook posts and the public pages probably tells a even richer story than the stories that we've gotten, although we've got some beauties. So I asked Nora to make a folder and put it on the Google Drive with all the stories in it, so that all the subcommittees could go through them. But she said some of them have requested confidentiality. So I need to get back with Nor and Roop to figure out how, so what do we do with those? I mean, we would have to transcribe them, I guess. Yeah, so Nora's gonna clean, she's just texting me as I'm talking here. We can clean the data of the names and identifiable markers and then share it at that point for those people.
So, question. So your report, what is the end product? Will you have recommendations from these stories, or will you be talking to the different subcommittees and saying, hey, I think this falls under you?
So our task was to just gather the stories and get them back so that the other subcommittees could use them in each of their areas as supporting data. We have, we've used a number of avenues to put it out. The only thing that we haven't done is the farmers market, which has been offered to us to set up a table at the farmers market with that we can use an iPad or something to do both the survey and collect stories. It's a Wednesday from 2:30 to 6:30, so we would need volunteers to man that booth. I don't think it's a bad idea to be there and let people know what's happening, even with the task force. But that's one more way that we could attempt to get some more information from people.
Okay, so I like the idea of putting them in a folder. Will you be tagging them if they fall under a specific subcommittee?
We could tag some that are very specific. My initial thought would be to not do that, because they could, again, it could be something that could be in more than one place. Louise, do you have a question?
You're on mute.
Yeah. No, please finish. I do have a question, but I want to.
That's pretty much it. I mean, that's pretty much all we have to report. I mean, I think we were deemed a subcommittee just because that's what we had to do to be able to meet, but it's not something. I mean, we could make recommendations based on what we've gathered, but I don't know that it's necessary. So I guess that's your call as committee chairs, whether or not you want to see that from us, or you just want us to organize them so that they can be accessed.
Thanks, Paula.
Okay, if I may now. And I don't know if you think this is inhumane, given that the spirit of the storytelling subcommittee was that human stories add richness and texture to the experience of racism and its associated issues. But at the same time, would it be inhumane of you to group the stories? What what types of discrimination are people reporting? Are people reporting sexual discrimination? Are they reporting ageism? Are they reporting ethnic discrimination, religious discrimination? You came to us saying there are all of these protected classes to which we need to open our arms, not just the descendants of enslaved peoples or Native Americans. So, I mean, I don't see why you should not at least tell us what protected classes are reporting that they have experienced being violated. And you can do that without violating anybody's confidentiality.
Sure, we can do that. I mean, I can tell you already that there's definitely been race, there's definitely been religion, there's definitely been disability. I can tell you that off the top of my head. And yes, Najib, we are still accepting stories. Absolutely.
Thanks, Paula. I think, or I would like to see them all put in a folder, and then maybe just adding a letter or two, public safety, if it falls under public safety, HC, if it falls under healthcare. And they can even have multiple tags, right? If you see that it falls under multiple, then that's fine too. That way everyone has access to this folder, and all the groups can go in there and pull out, what pertains to them. And if they want to read all of them, they can read all of them. Any other thoughts on that, Malin?
Hi, thanks. Paula, I think this is probably just a question for you or the storytelling committees. I mean, it's definitely disheartening to see the number 15 for the stories, but I think on a flip side, I'm seeing also trends on a survey side is, a lot of people are saying, yes, there is something, but, a lot of people are saying, no, we haven't reported. So, there is that trust factor, or who do you trust to share my story? And again, we are all volunteers. If they don't trust, the officials or, the supervisors where he or she encountered that issue, I mean, it seems perfectly fine that they don't trust us, you know what I mean? Because it's but natural. So I think, I don't know, should we do something more to kind of win their trust? And I don't know the answer right now, but it just popped up in my head,
That's the idea that we had was for each, if everybody reaches out to their own group, right? That hopefully you have that trust within your group, whether it's your church or your your whatever. And we thought that would work, right? It doesn't seem like it has. I think people are willing to anecdotally say that. I mean, I know there are issues of with people with disabilities because I've heard them all before. But now that I'm coming out and saying, hey, can you just throw that to me in writing? Everyone's like, oh no, I don't have time, or I don't want to do it, or I don't know. People don't want to get involved. I don't know what their reasoning is. But there is that fear, especially if you are somebody who has reported something and been blown off, right? I mean, I have a friend who was stalked, and they kept saying, well, you girls need to work it out. I was like, no, this person's harassing me, right? So if that's been the response that you've gotten, you're probably not really excited about, like, oh, I'm gonna see it. Maybe these guys will do something, because the other 5 people I've talked to never have. So I don't even want to. I'm done, So it's been really enlightening, for sure. Yeah, I mean, Louise, it's a great point. Even one person is enough for me as well. But it's just I really wanted to have some meat to the data, right? To say, we got this many people that reported, and maybe the survey will be enough to do that, right? Because we are making recommendations, and we are trying to, one of those things I'm sure is just awareness, and to be paying attention, right? The things that maybe weren't even on the radar before.
Navjeet, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so Paula, I think in a way I guess I'm surprised, but not really surprised, because a lot of the work I do in civil rights is similar. That it seems to be often a big burden to not just to share your story, but then to be kind of to draw attention. And also for many, it can be from you sort of almost relive the trauma in every time you tell the story, and also every time somebody mentions it, because it draws attention to you. And a lot of us don't want to draw attention, because this is often more sort of negative attention. And I think this is sort of the broader concern in this, that yes, it is about trust, but it's not just about trust. It's also about kind of trauma and reliving the trauma often. And so I just wanted to kind of mention that.
Yeah, I agree with Navjeet. I think that's a big piece of it too. It is that, and sometimes you sort of put it in the back of your head that, well, maybe it wasn't that big of a deal, and then this now makes it real again, right? And makes it and as you get other people's reaction, it sort of feeds that trauma. So I think that you're right, that is a big piece of it. It's frustrating because when you're trying to move the needle, it's so helpful to have, but you understand the person that it happened to. You don't want to put them through anything more than they've already been through either. So you're walking this really tight line of like, I want to move this forward, but I don't want to do that to them. And I think that's where we are. And it doesn't.
So
help.
having said that, I'll happily share a few snippets, if not stories. How's that?
We have your paintball story already, but we didn't write it down.
Thanks, Navjeet. And I'll also add to that people are just tired. Since this came out of the George Floyd murder, a lot has continued to happen since then. But also, a lot of people have been telling their stories, and they're just exhausted, right? So not only are you reliving your trauma, that takes physical toll on your body. So yeah, 15 is a small number, but I think that's a good number. Hopefully we can pull a good narrative out of that. I just don't want the public to see that number and say, see, Shrewsbury is perfect, because that's not the case, right? There are many reasons why people don't come forward.
And that may be part of the executive summary, right, that we want to include. I think, just hearing it from the members of this task force, I think that's something we want to point out in just because you didn't see it or you didn't hear it doesn't mean it's not happening, right? Just because in your little neighborhood, everything is hunky-dory and all the flowers are pretty doesn't mean it's not happening. Just because your kid didn't come back and say what happened at school doesn't mean it's not happening in the bathroom or the hallway or the parking lot, right? So I think that that's a really important, as we're pulling all this together, that we keep that in the forefront of what we're talking about. Yeah, I think, and it's not really about numbers. It's just like there may be something that's really kind of a stark reality check that has a personal story attached to it that would help. And they can be one or two or three within the, right. And that could be enough. I just had hoped we would see more because I know it's there. I just can't uncover it.
If I might just add, Paula, I think the other challenge is a lot of these may not seem, within quotes, serious enough, but we deal with microaggressions every day. How many do I relate to you?
Yeah, and Roop keeps saying that. She calls them death by 1,000 cuts is what she always calls them.
Yeah.
And they are little stupid things that, on the wrong day definitely don't feel like that. And even on the right day, they don't feel good, right? But you feel like, well, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to talk about that because that's just a little stupid thing. But it's not stupid and it's not little because it's an undercurrent that needs to go.
Thank you, Paula, for the update. Are there any more comments for this section for the storytellers? All right, so next up is general questions from the subcommittees and then confirming the next date. So keeping in mind everything that we just talked about regarding all the work that's still to be done. Priya, you've been awfully quiet. Nice to see your hand up.
Hi there. Could I ask about the surveys and what kind of results we're getting in other areas where we had the physical survey, the print survey? Because at the library, it's been a little disappointing. I had put out about 25 to 30 surveys in a very prominent location and right near the entrance of the library. And there's a volunteer greeter there who gently directs people towards that and says, oh, if you're interested, this is an anonymous survey. Could you please fill it? But either people are busy or, whatever. We've just gotten about 2 responses, I think, 2 people who've completed the survey. So I was just curious to see how, what kinds of responses we've got in other places.
Yeah, thanks, Priya, for asking that. I was going to thank you. I didn't know, I was not on the agenda, but thank you for asking that question so that I can respond. So I know from a print perspective, yourself, Deb, and Jenny had put together, the print copies in various locations. I mean, since then, because of the vacations and other schedules, we haven't got together as a team. So I don't know what the responses these individual locations have been received, but electronically, first week was really enthusiastic. I just saw everyday number just going up and up and up, and then since then, on both sides of 4th of July, it's been kind of lukewarm. So I've been wanting, and I know Ruth and Adiola have sent the follow-ups, and I think our team, this task force, has done its job because I see the numbers. But more response have been coming from more kind of social networks, like where the link has been posted, or some places of worship, on their websites. I'm working with ISW again. Maura has been working to get through the community bulletin. I haven't seen the link yet coming out through that email, so I know she's working. So there are a couple of avenues we are still working to get the word out. So I know we are like probably 2.5 weeks away from closing it out. But I'm seeing the trends, and that's what I was just sharing, the preliminary results as, there are people who are saying, yes, we went through the discrimination, but we haven't reported it, so that's where the earlier discussion was happening, is like, what do I talk about, so definitely it's a good collection of data that we are receiving. And, once we close it out, we'll kind of collate that information and present it to this forum.
Thank you.
So, continue to, have, people direct to it. Thank you for doing that. And, we'll collect the responses at the end of July.
Sure.
Thanks, Priya. Thanks, Malin. Anyone else? Any thoughts on the frequency of our meetings moving forward, when our next meeting should be? So originally we had proposed that we would take August off, August recess vacation month, no meetings, just as a way to let everybody spend time with their families, to have some time off. But just before the meeting, Adiola and I were talking about that and wondering if that was a good idea, just because of all the work that still needs to be done. So we had proposed meeting, we came up with meeting early August, so either the 2nd or the 9th, to give the survey committee an opportunity to present to us, to everybody. But we also want to give them time to be able to gather all the data, put it in a format. So maybe the 9th, how does that sound to everyone? August 9th. I know there are only 14 of us here. So we would need at least, a lot of us to be able to attend. So Beth, I know I've heard or I read somewhere that we can meet in person and online. Is that true? If we meet at town hall, which I'm going to aim for the next meeting to be in person, but will people still be able to call in?
So I think so. What day of the week is the 9th?
So all of our meetings have been on Mondays. So that's kind of the dates that we have kept with.
Yep. Okay. We just have to make sure there's not another board or committee that traditionally meet. Like, I'm just wondering if there's like a ZBA meeting or a planning board. Like, we have to make sure that there's no one else meeting that night.
Okay. So so the calendar that we have for the
with Taylor, and then I do believe that we are able to do a hybrid but you would need to have a quorum in the room.
Oh, so that might be tough. So 14 in the room.
Yeah.
I think so, unless that has been suspended by the governor's orders still.
So that's my concern, is that if we make it a hybrid, that most people will stay home.
Can we consider maybe, I know we're talking about coming together in person again, but I know that was a conversation around when we get into the nitty gritty of the reports and talking about how to consolidate that when everybody has their drafts kind of out there submitted. But for maybe the next two meetings, like for next meeting, we're going to talk about the survey. So maybe we just keep that one to online, since there's going to be a lot of sharing and presentation. And we want to make sure we do have a quorum. So do you want to stick to online for at least the next meeting? Keeping in mind that the in-person, we should get in person, but I feel like the in-person meeting should be when we're really hashing out the nitty gritty of the surveys once we get them back. I don't know how folks feel about that.
I like that idea. So having the next meeting or two online and then moving to in person.
Right.
Okay. So will August 9th work for the subcommittee, for the survey subcommittee to present their findings?
Yeah, I think it should be fine in my opinion. I mean, if we are not able to enter the print or the physical surveys that have been, collected at the end of July, that's probably minimal responses. But we should be able to collect that information from the online survey that we are receiving. So 1 week should be fine. I think that gives us kind of at least a timeline for our team to meet beforehand. So yes, 9th will work.
Okay, thank you. So we'll do the 9th at 7 p.m. We'll do the full 2 hours. If we adjourn early, great. If we don't, we'll have the time. Maybe we can talk about the survey results, and also if more people are online than are here now, we can also discuss the final report again and how we're going to approach that. Is there anything else that anybody would like to see on the agenda?
I like that idea.
Is it, if any of the subcommittees have their reports, I think that would be, we could do a preliminary, maybe get 1 or 2 out of the way if people already have them done.
Okay, thank you, Paul. That's a good idea. So what I'll do is or Adiola and I will email everybody and ask them. We'll have Taylor put up a folder for for the subcommittees to start putting in their draft final reports. Does that sound good? So that people can read them before they actually come to the meeting, whenever that is. Yeah.
We should probably also try to agree to finalizing what the actual template should look like at the next meeting.
The template for the recommendations or the template for the report?
The template, like the final template.
Okay.
For each subcommittee's matching, we're all supposed to have matching templates, right?
How we just decided that, do we need to actually formally vote? Is that what you're looking for?
We can't vote because it's not on the agenda, but.
Not a vote for
Do we need to vote on the template? I don't know that we do.
Right, not a vote for the template. Decide to finalize here, this is the template we're going to use. So everybody has what to work off of by the next.
I thought we had done that.
I thought so too. So I thought we were moving with every subcommittee is going to put each recommendation on its own sheet using the template that I had sent out, but we're not going to put anything about budget, right? Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so that is the final. Okay.
I think so.
I missed that. Sorry.
That's okay. It was a lot of back and forth. So, I will remove. Let me just share this again. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So I will remove the budget part. So please, someone say if you can see it.
We can see it. Adiola, do you want to word that a different way? Because what you were thinking in terms of budget was,
Yeah. So
or
what
maybe it's just in a statement to the subcommittee, to the chairs, in terms of maybe it goes in supporting data if you found something from another town or you talked to another town. I did have a conversation with a lady from Sudbury who's just getting started. That was interesting.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
All right, so
Actually, I was interested. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I'll remove the budget piece and then add a little blurb here about what I discussed earlier, what I pointed out earlier.
Paula, did you mind just sharing a couple minutes about that meeting?
Yeah, they're basically a tiny little committee that was in Sudbury that was appointed. I'm trying to remember now where my notes are here. They only have like 6 people, and they're trying to figure out, what the direction is. They were shocked that we had so many people and how many different, subcommittees we had and all the work that we were doing. So they're having a little bit of the same, it's such a big topic. Where do you start and what do you prioritize and what do you, and they've got, like I said, a much smaller group. I think she said it's like 6 people. And they were really looking to see what we did. They were asking about the survey. They were sort of taking the opposite approach of wanting to put a survey out first to then decide what they were going to do, versus doing it sort of later in the process. I find my notes from when I talked to her.
So you might want to share with her I don't know if you talked about the storytellers. The results.
We did.
Yeah.
We did, and she liked that idea. And then, I think she had the same reservation about protecting people and would people come forward. So I think, it's what we're doing is not unique, and the 2 communities are very similar. So, it was interesting just to kind of see their approach, which was, like I said, that she's like kind of the same 6 people that she sees in town all the time. And there's a lot of denial in the town about whether it's even necessary or whether, there's anything to look at, which was interesting.
Great. Louise, you have a question or a comment?
No, it has to do with setting up. Can you go back to the template again? Because you had something about outline your project and specify the deliverables and success criteria. I just want to point out that there are always ways to, if you don't underestimate the power of the internet, there are always ways to concoct deliverables. For example, if you add something to if you add a landing page for housing diversity, right? The success criterion can simply be the number of people who land on that page. We can have counting the number of inquiries about diversity, equity, and inclusion can be counted as a measurable. I mean, as a deliverable, right? If we put a DEI task force landing page somewhere, then that access to a voluntary online training about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the number of people who take that online training is a measurable, countable success criterion. 100 people the first year, 1,000 people the second year. That's all I wanted to say. You can always set up measurable deliverables.
Yeah. So we were going to keep the top 2 sections, solution or recommendation, and deliverables and success criteria. And then I'm going to remove the budget piece and keep this here but as optional. All right, so what I have is that we'll meet on August 9th, 7 p.m. online. and the survey committee will present something. We'll also discuss the final report. And I'm going to remind the subcommittees to please submit their final drafts if they have them. And we can talk about those at the meeting as well. Is there anything else? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to
Before you adjourn,
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
that's okay. I just wanted to just make a note. I'm not sure if you had announced this to the group or not, that Alan Jarrell was appointed to the Finance Committee. And I think that that is just proof of the effectiveness of just even having a DEI task force in town, that already we're seeing some diversity being brought into boards and committees that have quite a bit of influence on the direction of the town. And I'm really just so pleased that Alan accepted the appointment. And while he is not going to be able to finish out his work with the task force, because in our bylaws, you can't do finance committee and another committee, I'm just really grateful that I had the opportunity to work with him on this committee, and grateful that he's being appointed to the finance committee.
Thank you, Beth, for bringing that up. So I apologize. I meant to bring that up earlier. Fell out of my head. So yeah, so what Beth just said, yeah, Alan was really great, and it does show that the work we're doing is being recognized in the town. So
That is definitely awesome. Bittersweet that we don't get to finish out with him, but it's incredible. So congrats to Alan. We'll definitely miss him on our task force.
all right.
Louise, final word.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.